Vidura Das. This meeting is being live streamed. Jai Vidura Prabhu, I just offered my obeisances to you, but I'll offer them once more, at least. Jai Srila Vidura Prabhu Namo
Vidura
Namaha.
Das. This
Hare
meeting is being.
Krishna. All right, let me just come back here to where your content was removed. What? Due to a violation of our community guidelines. Uh, gee. Review content. What is it? I just received a little warning here from a previous YouTube. I wonder what that is all about.
Really? Weird.
Okay, I'll have to go back and look at that later. Thank you, Mr. YouTube, whoever you are. So Vidura Prabhu, I've come.
I was thinking, wow, that would be interesting to join in some of those conversations. They looked amazing. I didn't see anything controversial there.
Oh, you mean the previous interviews that I've done?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll have to investigate that later. So Vidura Prabhu, I've come to know, I've heard of your name over the years, and I remember, looking in various books like this one here that I dug out of my library, the Guru Reform Notebook, and I see that you're responsible here for production. And I imagine you were responsible for many, many others. But before I address that, I'd just like to know, was it in the 70s or early 80s that you first met the disciples of Srila Prabhupada?
It was in the mid 70s. The devotees started going around Ireland, setting up pandal programs at all the Irish music festivals. That's traditional.
Yes.
And, and of course, traditional Irish music and a festival, they would set up mostly at the All Ireland. Each county in Ireland has its own competition. And then there's a provincial competition and there's an All Ireland competition, which is huge. So everybody goes, and of course it's Ireland, like what else do you do in Ireland except drink and Guinness and whiskey
and dance
and chant on the street. Yeah. So in the middle of this festival, the devotees come chanting down the street in the remote town in Ireland somewhere. It wasn't even a big place. And I'd never seen them before. And I was like, wow, what is it? And I was tripping.
And were you a school kid at that time?
No, this was around 75. No, I'd already established my life. I was born in 51. So I was 24.
You were already working a job or something?
Yeah, I had my own business, and I did agricultural engineering. So I made mostly farm buildings, cow byres, and stuff like that.
Cool.
And so as the devotees were passing by, they were handing out sticks of incense, lit sticks of incense. So I took the stick from this devotee and I looked at it until it burned all the way down to the end.
Oh, because you were tripping. Okay.
I was so mesmerized by this. And then after some time, then the devotees came back up that street. And in the middle of the street, they laid down this kind of a durry, and they sat down and gave a talk.
Durry means like a madras, like a cloth.
Yes. Yeah. In the middle of these, thousands of bottles of whiskey, empty bottles, and they just cleared a space, sat down, and gave a talk.
I'd just like to make a point there. Excuse me for interjecting. That this is further proof that whenever there was a big event, from the time of Srila Prabhupada, whether it was an anti-Vietnam protest or whether it was a love-in, a be-in, a rock festival, devotees took the opportunity. There's a big crowd. We don't determine, well, is this crowd actually for the Prime Minister of England or not for the Prime Minister? Or because it says in the Adi Leela that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the Panchatattva, they did not consider who was a fit or an unfit candidate. They just broke open the treasure house of love of Krishna. So that's what the devotees are doing, right?
Exactly. Exactly. So I just happened to be standing or sitting or tripping right beside where the devotees set up this durry
Okay.
and sat down. And the one who gave the talk was, do you know Balabhadra? You remember him?
Balabhadra, Balabhadra. Oh yes, he went on to take sannyas later.
Yeah, he's a bit like Brahmananda. He's big. He's huge.
Right. I think he later
So
became Puri Maharaj or something like that.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. So he had the madunga on the end of his tummy, right? Uh, and the madunga looked like a pea. You know, he's so big. So he played the madunga, and then he gave a talk. And at the end of the talk, which I didn't understand a word,
Right.
he said, "Any questions?" And I was like,
Was he really originally from Scotland?
"Yeah, he is Scottish, a real
Okay.
Scottish accent."
Do
I
the
didn't
Irish
understand.
and do the Irish and Scottish get along?
Well, they do, yeah, to a certain extent, but the
Okay.
accents are really different, very
Okay.
different.
So any
So,
questions and what were you thinking?
so nobody had a question because everybody was tripping. This festival, to gain entry, you had to pay at the gate, right?
Okay.
And the whole town was fenced off. So as you paid your fee, you got a ticket and you were given a tab of acid. Everybody in the festival was given a tab of acid as
Everyone
part of
was
the
everyone was ripped.
yeah, everyone, the whole place. So
Wow.
I suppose there was about maybe 5,000 people there.
Wow.
And so when nobody asked a question, he responded. He said, "The land of the living dead." And I was like, I was just shocked, absolutely shocked. So then, anyway, that festival was over. Everybody scattered, went back to wherever they
You
came
didn't
from.
get a book or anything, just a stick of incense.
No, no,
Okay.
no. So then, a few months later, I was at a Screamers convention. You remember the Screamers?
No, that's not familiar.
They were into what's called the primal
Oh, the
scream.
primal scream. John Lennon was into that. He was doing it with
Yeah,
Yoko.
yeah, exactly. And again, the devotees were there, and Preetu was there, and
Was
quite
Tree
a few other,
was Tree
quite a few other.
Bhuvannath was Tree Bhuvannath at either of those?
No, no, Tribhuvanat was in the Middle East or somewhere at
Okay.
that time.
Okay.
He didn't do much preaching in Ireland, actually.
Okay.
So,
But he was from Ireland, wasn't he?
well, yeah, yeah, it's very much Irish.
Yes.
So the devotees were and this was immediately after Prabhupada had left. So I think it was around January 78,
Okay.
and one of the devotees was showing me the Bhagavad Gita, and as he opened it to show me something in the Gita, it opened on Prabhupada's picture. And just for some weird reason, I said, "Wow, who is this person? I want to meet this person." And the devotee said, "Well," he started crying. So I was like, "Oh, did I ask the wrong question?" And so then the devotee said, "Well, this is our spiritual master, and he just left." So Prabhupada left in November, and this was January. So the whole, you can imagine, the mood was completely, in those days, absorbed in Prabhupada. So the devotee gave me a card. He gave me to visit the temple. And with all my friends, I managed a rock band at the time.
What was the
And
name of it? What was the name of the band?
I forget what they were called. It was a local little group.
Okay.
And in County Fermanagh in the north of Ireland. And they used to go around. I used to arrange little gigs in the pubs and clubs and stuff like that for them.
You're a booking
But
agent.
they were all with me at that festival,
Yeah.
and where we first met the devotees when we were all tripping. So we used to go around at the end of each gig, we would sing the Maha Mantra in jest because we each had a card, right? So we became known as the Hare Krishnas. We had nothing to do with Hare Krishna. We were mocking the devotees, right? Because we'd all been at that festival.
But that
And
but that but that stuck in everyone's mind.
Yeah, exactly. So we were known as the Hare Krishnas. So then a few months after I met the devotees at that Screamers convention, I was in Dublin, the capital city, when I had to visit a friend of mine there. I forget what I had to buy some part for machinery or something like that. And it was a devotee repairing a van out on the street in front of the temple. And I passed by and I recognized the devotee. So I had this card in my pocket and I was a bit stoned. So I was wondering, oh, because it says on the back of the card, on the back of the mantra, it said, come for a free meal, valid £5. So I said to this devotee, excuse me, is this card still valid? And he said, yeah, sure. And he drags me in and he gives me this mountain of prasadam. so so I didn't know what was going on. I said, wow, this is
Was
far out.
was this in Dublin or where?
Yeah, this was in Dublin, some months after I met the devotees at the Screamers convention. So, and then it got a bit late for me to travel back to where I lived, which is quite far in the countryside. So he said, well, why don't you stay the night? I said, yeah, okay, fine. So I stayed the night, put me up in a nice, comfortable room and everything like that.
Who
And the
was it
next,
that who was the devotee that was facilitating you? Do you remember?
yeah, his name is Atman Nivedana,
Is he
also an Irish.
Prabhupada's disciple or
No,
later?
but he joined around 78 also.
Okay.
And so the next morning, the same devotee, he woke me up at 3:30 and he says, okay, we get up now. Well, I said, well, maybe you do, but I certainly do. And he said, no, 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 we have our first program of the morning is at 4:30. And, I'll show you where the shower room is and everything like that. I said, what? Shower? I had hair down to my knees, right?
You didn't realize what you were signing up for when you had that plate of prasadam.
No idea. And so, yeah, when he gave me that plate of prasadam the day before, I said, wow, this is amazing. The only principle I ever observed as a karmi was I was a vegetarian. I've been a vegetarian since I was a child.
Wow.
My mother didn't know what to do with me because from the age of 7, I remember we were traveling on a bus one time in Dublin, and there was an advertisement on the bus for sausages. So it was a bit confusing for me because there was a pig dressed in a tuxedo and he was carrying a plate of sausages like he's serving them in a restaurant.
Yeah.
I thought sausages were made from pig, but
Right.
then why would the pig be carrying sausage? So
Yeah.
I pulled my mother's skirt. She was chatting with the other ladies when they were
Yeah.
going shopping. I said, excuse me, where does the pig get the sausages from? So my mother just ignored me. And and then I insisted. So one of the other ladies says, well, they take the pig, throw him in a machine, and sausages come out the other end. I
Oh
was
God.
like, "Hmm." So when we got home that evening after the shopping, and there was sausages for dinner, I said,
Oh.
I don't want to eat that. So my mother gave me a clip on the ear and sent me to bed. So and a
Well,
few days
the devotee in you was coming out.
Yeah. So a few days later, I think we had, in those days, you didn't buy burgers, you made them at home.
Yeah, yeah.
So my mother made burgers and we were eating burgers. I said to her, my mother, is that a cow? She said, of course it's a cow. What do you think it is? Eating in Ireland in the 50s meant eating meat.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
I mean, the vegetables were like not even considered.
Kind of a side thing.
Yeah, yeah. So another clip on the ear and I was sent to bed. So then I stopped eating. I just stopped eating. So my
Wow.
mother brought me to the
You're being
doctor.
guided by Super Soul from within.
Yeah, there was something going on there. So she brought me to the doctor, and the doctor said, I don't see anything wrong with him. But he wrote a note and he said, okay, take him to see this child psychiatrist.
Ah,
So they brought me to see a child psychiatrist, and he showed me this silhouette and this image for over an hour, different images, and asking me questions. I'm just a kid just answering whatever he was
yeah.
asking. So then at the end of the hour, my mother said to him, "So what's wrong with him?" And he said, "He doesn't want to eat meat." I said, "Yeah, I know that." My mother said, "What's wrong with him?" And he said, "He doesn't want to eat meat." That was it. So my mother used to pull her hair out. Oh my God, what's going on with this child? She didn't know what to do with me. But when I got that plate of prasadam years later, I said to this devotee, "Wow, what do you put in this?" And he said, "We put bhakti." I said, "Oh, where do I buy bhakti?" So then he had to explain to me, "No, you can't buy it. Something you don't go to a shop." Because I was eating vegetarian food, but I never tasted anything like this. This was like wild stuff,
Out
you
of this
know,
world. Out of this world.
completely, completely. So the next morning when he wakes me up and he says, "Well, we get up now," and he showed me where the shower room was, and the shower room was in the basement, and all these brahmacharis in copans waiting for the shower. I was like, wow. As soon as it's light, I'm getting out of here. This is crazy. And they gave me this towel, which is about the size of a handkerchief. So I'm trying to dry this hair from a cold shower. So by the time I got into the temple room, I just made my way to the sound or wherever it was coming from. They were all on the floor. It was the Prema Dwani prayers. When I walked in the door, everybody's on the floor, and I'm going, "Oh my God, what is this?" So then the only word I could hear that I could remotely understand was the word key. So
Right.
I got down on the floor to help them to look for the key that I presumed they'd lost. They said, "What the hell is wrong with you?" And I said, "Well, what's wrong with you guys?" So they thought I was mad. I thought they were mad. So there was the reciprocation on which we based our relationship on my first day in the temple. So, but they knew I was addicted to halava, so they gave me the whole maha plate. The maha
Wow.
plate came off the altar. It was thrown on my plate, and they said, "Eat." I said, "Oh, okay, this is nice." So then I kind of stumbled from one day to the next. No chanting, no interest in the philosophy, nothing. I was living for the breakfast halava.
Right.
That was it. That was my only motivation
That
to
was
even.
worth it. That in of itself, that was worth it.
Yeah, right. So then about 3 or 4 days later, I come into the prasadam room and I look in the pot, peanuts, tapioca. Oh my God, all the things I hate. So I said, "Oh, forget this." I just got my bag and I walked out the door. No breakfast, nothing.
You weren't a
So
big fan of not a big fan of Ekadasi from the beginning.
definitely not. So then, for somewhere or other, Preeta saw me leaving, and he comes running after me. There was a park in front of the temple. I was halfway through the park by the time he got me. He said, "Where are you going?" I said, "Well, there's none of that. What do you call that? That hal stuff, halava." He said, "No, no, no, no. Today is a Kaddishi." And I looked at my watch and I said, "You know, you people, you even have different names for the days of the week. Today's Tuesday. I don't know what your day is called, but it's Tuesday, okay?" And he said, "No, no, no. It's a day when we fast." So, okay, fine. That's great. Nice knowing you. See you. And he drags me back to the temple, and he got Rambaru, his wife, to cook me a pot of halava.
Oh wow.
She cooked a pot of halava, and she threw the whole pot on the plate. I said, "No,
Wow.
eat." I ate. I stuffed it down. So then I stumbled from one Ekadashi. The next Ekadashi, they locked me in a room to make sure I wouldn't escape.
Ah,
Gradually, somehow or other, I got to start chanting, reading the books, but I was definitely the most reluctant bhakta you've ever heard in your life. And here I
but but
am.
but Prithu Prabhu and Ramburu, they saw your potential.
Yeah, they did.
As
They
long as
did.
you got your halava fix.
Yes, that was it. That was it. So I became a reluctant devotee. So Prithu, he was the person who more or less saved me and made me a devotee. And he was the very reason why I left Ireland. some couple of years later. So it was a real rasabas. But I think we've all had those relationships with so many devotees down through the years.
Sure.
It's the
Yeah.
way it goes. Yeah.
So, okay, so this must take us up to around almost 1980 or something like that?
Yeah, 79. Yeah, it was
79.
79.
Did you take initiation by this time?
I did. I took initiation from Jaya Tirtha.
Okay. Yeah.
And Jaya Tirtha,
Srila Tirthapad at that time.
yes. And Jaya Tirtha had heard, when I was a student, I used to run a restaurant, a French restaurant, a bistro in Dublin. It was the first French restaurant bistro in Dublin. And just to make a few bob in student days. And he had heard this, and we were just about to open Soho Street. We just bought Soho Street, and we're just about to open. It was called Healthy, Wealthy, and Wise. So he said, "Oh," so he brought me over to London to run the temple when we opened it. So I ran
So
the.
you became, excuse me, you became the first temple president of Soho?
No. I was the restaurant manager.
Restaurant manager, okay.
Yeah, Rohini Nandana was the temple president at that time.
Yeah, I liked him so much. I still have his, he made the first shloka book.
That's right. That's right. He used to have this tiny little book.
Vaishnav verse book, I think it was called.
Yeah,
He actually, I shouldn't blow my own horn, but I took a course with him in 1980 called Armed with Shlokas. I took it at the Vrindavan Institute of Higher Education, and he asked us all to give reasons why it was important to learn shlokas. And I gave him a few reasons, and he credits me at the beginning of that book. Maybe it's the only book in the world where
Wow.
just because I gave him a few suggestions about why it was important. But I
Really?
liked him. I liked him very much. He was very, very full. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, we see him. We see him quite often. He lives in Glastonbury now.
Great. Please give him my obeisances if you'll remember me.
I certainly will.
Yeah.
So there was Bajahari and me. We both were running the restaurant when it opened.
Yes.
And I ran that. I ran that up to I say about a year or so.
Yes.
And then your friend Rochan, he passed through London on the way back from Africa. He was the regional secretary, Jaya Tirtha's regional secretary in East Africa. Vaishnav verse book. Yeah, that's it. That's the one. Wow.
Yeah, beautifully done. Yeah. No, you had great association. Rohini Nandan was a big, him and Donavir, who's now Maharaj, and Vipramukhya. They were fabulous trio. The way they masterminded the Bhakta program.
Yes.
I went to Krum Court in 1980, I guess it was, or 81, very early on. And I saw 100 freshly shaved up bhaktas there. And I was like, wow, like these devotees are amazing that they could, they created like a machine for making bhaktas.
It was like that. It was definitely like that.
Krum Court was kind of creepy. They had these ancient paintings on the wall. And I think it was from the 11th century or something, that building. But yeah, wow, totally amazing. So, okay, so did you accept initiation from Jai Tirtha Prabhu because you felt inspired by him, or because you were told, no, this is the zonal acharya and this is who?
He was the only one that I knew.
Okay.
And it was the zonal era, wasn't it?
Right.
But he was also a nice person, and I liked him a lot.
Sure.
But then when I was running the restaurant, Rochan breezed through from Africa one day, and we were taking breakfast prasadam together. So Rochan being Rochan, he's always on some kind of a scam or other. So he turns to me and he says, "Hey, have you ever been to Africa?" I said, "No." He said, "Would you like to go?" I said, "Well, I don't know." I said, "Well, if you do," he said, "here's a ticket." So he just takes a ticket out of his pocket and he hands it to me. And I said, "Oh," I said, "But this is a ticket from London to Nairobi. He said, yeah. So, but it's in the name of some African devotee's name that he had brought from Africa
Right.
into London that he was going to bring to Canada.
Okay.
But in order to get into London, he needed a return ticket. But that
Okay.
return ticket was now useless. So he thought, well, instead of throwing it in the bin, I may as well make an extra man, while I'm here. And that African devotee's name was Wagadugu, whatever his name was.
Right.
And so I said, oh, okay. So I put it in my pocket. Rochan went on his way to Canada. And a few days later, I think I was feeling a bit despondent or whatever. I said, well, why don't I go to Nairobi? So after Mangalarti, I sneaked out the door, headed out to the airport, and it was Aeroflot, Moscow Airlines.
You were still managing the Healthy Wealthy Wise at this time?
With Bajahari.
So you kind of just left it with Bajahari to manage. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I blooped to Africa.
Okay.
So then, when in those days there was no security or check-ins or anything like that. You checked your ticket in one place and your passport in another place, completely separate. There was no connection between the two. So in London, they accepted the ticket and stopping off in Moscow and then flying to Nairobi. So I checked in and fine, got on the flight, landed in Moscow. I think there was a 4-hour stopover or something like that. But in Moscow, it's a different story. Get in the queue for immigration, they match the ticket with the passport.
Uh-oh.
So the guy, and of course, my passport at that time was about 7 years old. So in my passport photograph, my hair's down to my knees.
Oh,
I had a beard, I had a mustache, eyes in the back of my head, black, ashen-faced, and here I am standing in front of this guy, shaven head, in saffron, and with tilak, and the guy looks at me, looks at the passport, looks at the ticket, and he said, "Nothing matches here." I said, "Well, you're not the body, your spirit, soul, and all this kind." He blows a whistle, and they whisk me away to this room for interrogation.
Oh, wow.
So the guy is saying, "Well, and at that time, the Olympic Games were going on in Moscow, and Jimmy Carter, he boycotted the Olympic Games because Russia invaded Afghanistan. So they were very sensitive to any foreign, interference in their games. And here I arrive, with this weird name on the ticket, a completely unrelated person in the passport, and then this weird guy in a shaved head standing in front of him. So I was arrested and charged with being a spy, and they interrogated me.
Oh, wow.
4 hours later, whatever it was, my flight for Nairobi was gone. And so they kept me for a few days. So then they're getting heavier and heavier and heavier with their questions. And I just remembered somehow in the back of my mind, I remember that Ireland had just opened an embassy in Moscow, which was in their interest, not in Ireland's interest, because then they could refuel their flights on the way to Cuba. And so I said, I want to see the Irish ambassador. So then everything changed. People started getting, oh, the Irish ambassador. Oh, so, well, we think we might have made a mistake. And they dust me down and said, okay,
Wow.
sorry, you can go now. I said, what do you mean I can go now? My flight left 2 days ago.
Yeah.
And there's not another flight for another 3 days.
Yeah.
So, oh, sorry about that. So what they did was they brought this limousine and they put me up in the accommodation the American athletes were supposed to stay in. And the next morning, the limousine arrives at the accommodation and they took me on a tour of Moscow into Red Square, into Lenin's museum, the Kremlin. And there was a big queue for all these tourists to go into the Lenin's museum. And my limo went right up to the top of the queue. Everybody was saluting. I was treated like royalty. Wow. And then 2 or 3 days later, They brought me to the airport, put me on the plane to Nairobi, upgraded me to first class, and off I
Wow.
went. So then I landed in Nairobi, and this is I know nothing about Africa, absolutely nothing. So the guy says, "Okay, you just came from Moscow, yeah, okay, and how long do you intend to stay in Kenya?" I said, "Well, maybe about a year or so." So a year, okay, fine. And how much money do you have? So I said, I've got about £10. Oh, you're staying for a year and you got £10 in your pocket. And you have a return ticket? No, I came on a one. Oh, you came on a one-way ticket. Okay, you're going back on the flight to Moscow
Oh
this evening.
no.
So no, please, don't send me to Moscow anywhere, not Moscow. He said, that's where you came from. That's where you're going to. Okay, denied entry. I said, oh my God. So I phoned the temple, and they let me make one phone call. Brashinga, you know Brashinga?
A
He's
Swami now.
Yeah, he's a Swami. He's from Scotland also.
Right.
And I phoned him and I said, I'm here in the airport in Nairobi and they're refusing me entry. He said, and who are you? I said, well, I've come from London. Rochan gave me a ticket to, I said, oh, Rochan. That's all he said. Oh, Rochan. So I said, oh, okay. He said, so what's your problem? I said, well, they won't let me in because they want me to have a return ticket. Can you get me one? He said, are you joking? He said, we have to apply for foreign exchange in this country to go and buy a ticket. After you get the foreign exchange from the central bank, which takes about 3 months, then you go to a travel agent and you get a ticket, and then you can fly wherever you want. So getting you a ticket within a matter of hours, said, forget it. The immigration guy told me, if you bring a return ticket, I'll let you stay. I said, please, Prabhu, help. So we arrived at 6 o'clock in the morning in Nairobi, and the
So
flight going back to Moscow.
excuse me, Beer Stringer was in Nairobi or he was back in the UK?
No, he's the temple president
Okay.
in
Okay.
Nairobi.
Okay.
So, and I said, so the flight back to Moscow was leaving at 6 in the evening, and I arrived at 6 in the morning.
Okay.
So I said, oh. So he says, okay, fine, we'll see what we can do. He said, but you're going back to Moscow. I said, oh. So about 4 in the afternoon, the devotees arrive in the airport waving a ticket. There was, do you remember a devotee called Patita Pavan?
The astrologer?
No, not the astrologer. There's another Patita Pavan.
Okay.
The astrologer is actually called Patit Udaran,
Right,
but
correct.
the other one is Patita Pavan.
From
Also
the
Prabhupada.
from the States or from the
Yeah,
UK or
I think it was from the West Coast somewhere.
okay. Yeah.
Anyway, he arrived with Prashinga, and they had a ticket, and they showed it to the immigration guy. He stamped my passport. He let me in, and that was it. So on the way to the temple, I said, well, I thought this was not possible. How did you do this? He
Uh-huh.
said, well, we have a life member who's a travel agency, and
Oh,
he
nice.
forwarded the ticket.
Nice.
So that's how we got in. And
Right.
that was the beginning of my sojourn in Africa, which
This is
lasted,
around 1980, 81.
yeah, that was 1980.
And so what was the service they gave you?
Well, I was the only devotee in the temple. It was about 30 devotees. Imagine. Ramakali was there,
Okay.
Shastivar,
Yes.
Kukumoya, Rochan, of course, Ajamil, and a whole bunch. There was about 30 devotees altogether. I was the only one who wasn't Prabhupada's disciple. The
So
only
you
one.
had a lot of great association then.
Oh yeah, it was amazing, absolutely incredible. So we would do Harinams and go out and travel and preach and do books and make life members and whatever. I just dived in right away, straight into the whole thing. And then, of course, there was a coup in 1982, and there was a lot of repercussions from the coup. So we got out. I went back to Ireland, and then that was when all the devotees went to Mayapur for the first time ever. So we all went to Mayapur in 1982. We were going out on the parikrams every day in Mayapur. The whole yatra went, over 30 devotees from Ireland.
They must have
And
left at least one pujari, right?
yeah, that was about it.
Yeah.
And so we arrived back from one of the parikrams one day at the Mayapur gate, and Jayatirtha's walking out, and he said, "Okay, all my disciples, get your bags and get your sleeping bag. We're going across the river to Sridhar Maharaj's mat."
Uh-huh.
So you don't know what's this? This is like, wow, this is far out. What's
An,
going
an,
on?
an
And,
excursion, an excursion.
the guru says, do this, jump
Yeah,
high, that's it.
right.
It's like that was the mood. So we were just about to go in and get our bags and everything. There's a whole bunch of other GBCs, Sridainanda and Tamal, and a whole bunch of other people were standing at the gate. And they're saying, well, of course, he's the guru. Whatever he says, you have to do. You're the disciple. What we're asking you is, please come to the GBC rooms, spend a half an hour with us. We'll explain what's going on there. And then afterwards, if you decide to leave, leave. So most left, some stayed. And I was one of the people who stayed. And I was...
Did you go to the GBC room? Did you go to listen to what they had to say?
No, it's your parcel.
I got a parcel, Prabhu. Hold on. Can we put
Okay.
it on hold?
Yeah, go ahead, take care of that. Go
I got
ahead.
a sign. I got a sign for this
Yeah,
parcel.
go
Hold
ahead.
on.
Go ahead, do that. So, um, yes, I met Jayatirtha Prabhu. Um, gee, maybe it was in 1977. I remember going by his room, and he was meticulously worshiping some deities that he had. I believe he was made a minister of deity worship. He had certainly contributed to a book called the Archana Padati. It
Yeah.
was it was one of the first um, books produced on deity worship. I remember there was an earlier one than that, which was in Los Angeles, since Srila Prabhupada considered Los Angeles to be the head of his Western headquarters. So a simple book on deity worship, I believe, based on what Shilavati Devi Dasi had learned from Srila Prabhupada, was like the initial deity worship book. I'm just filling in some time, mentioning how when I was in Mayapur, I believe it was 77, maybe it was a little later in 1980. I cannot recall, but I remember going by Jai Tirtha Prabhu's room in Mayapur and seeing him very meticulously worshiping the deity.
Oh yes.
And I felt like very honored to see this because I knew that he had become either the minister of deity worship or at least that he had produced the Archana Padati book with Jai
Yes.
Satyanandana. And so that's just one little memory I have of Jayatirtha in
Yes.
Mayapur. Yeah, so
That's
did you
right.
go? Sorry?
So we went to the GBC rooms, and believe it or not, instead of half an hour, we spent 3 days in the GBC rooms.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of discussion. Some of it was very volatile, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
And they fed us in the GBC room. Tamal Hridayananda was dishing out the prasadam,
You
washing
got
the plates.
you got your halava fix.
We got our halava fix, and they put in bedding for us, and then we
Wow.
wake up in the morning. The discussion would start again. There
Wow.
was no Mangalarti, no chanting, nothing. It
Wow.
was just discussions, 3 days solid.
Did you
So
see it as a kind of indoctrination or no?
no, it wasn't. It was completely open. I mean, you imagine Jayatirtha was the first. So if we'd have all left with him, that would have been a big, big, big blow, not only to the GBC and the whole zonal acharya thing, it would have been a big blow to Prabhupada's mission.
Hmm.
So they really grouped together to try, they really were trying to help us, I must say. I mean, they were trying to save themselves, of course. That was part of their motivation, but they really were trying to help us and trying to guide us. And everything was on the table. There was no discussion were off the table. There's so many things went on.
I have a
Anyway,
question. Yes, I have a question. Had Jai Tirtha taken sannyas at this time?
yes, yeah.
So
He was saying,
I've heard over the years that that was the first big mistake, along with Bhagavan taking sannyas, along with Hangsadutta taking sannyas, because these devotees were doing excellently as long as they were grounded with their good wives. But when they
yeah.
were pushed to take that sannyas, then very difficult to maintain that kind of profile with hundreds
Mm,
or thousands of young ladies adoring you,
yeah.
etc. So yes, they were trying. Do you remember any of the highlights of those 3 days of intense discussions? Not much.
Sometimes it almost came to blows. They were so volatile. I remember one time Hansadutta was sitting there. Of course, he was GBC, sannyasi, guru, everything like
Yeah.
that. And he just left the room for a couple of minutes. And then somebody said, "Why did Hansadutta Swami leave the room?" And then he came back and he said, "I needed to go to the restroom."
Right.
That was controversial. Just going to the toilet was controversial. So
So when you said it was volatile, that means there must have been some like a party and an anti-party, two different views
yeah,
that were coming to blows.
yeah. Why the hell did can a guru leave ISKCON? So that means that all of you are bogus. I mean, those were kind of parts of the discussions. What the hell is going on here? This was like a dent in the armor of the whole zonal acharya thing. And of course, they were trying to prop it up. And at the same time, I must say, they were looking around to see, well, which of these guys can come to me? They can become
Uh,
my disciples.
fishing,
That was,
fishing,
yeah,
fishing.
yeah, there was fishing. So anyway, all of that was over. All of that ended, and after 3 days, at least the Irish devotees, none of us left. We stayed.
Did you meet any of the devotees that did go across the river, met Srila
Oh
Sridhar
yeah,
Maharaj?
later,
And
afterwards,
what
when they came back.
what did you hear? What was their response? What did you hear back from them?
Well,
Or
they just left ISKCON. And that was
oh,
it.
oh,
They just they were gone. They went with Jaya Tirtha. Jaya
you never
Tirtha
saw
left.
them. You never saw them again.
Yeah, I saw them, but they were with Jaya Tirtha. Jaya Tirtha had his own ashram, his own thing going on in London and different temples here and there, and
Uh-huh.
they were gone, completely gone,
Wow. That must have been a little traumatizing for you.
to say the least. So that was my first time in India, my first experience of India.
Wow.
And on top of having the first experience of India, which is traumatic itself, then you have your guru run away.
Right.
So it wasn't the best experience. So at the end of those 3 days, although the festival wasn't over, I said I don't want to handle any more of this. I'm going back to Europe. So I said okay, and 2 or 3 devotees, they came to Calcutta, and we just flew back to London. So there was a stopover in London, and it was a bit of a gap between the flight from London to Dublin to go back to Ireland. So I said, well, why don't we go down to Soho Street, and at least we can get darshan for a couple of hours, get a little prasadam, and then we come back to the airport. It's not that far. So we said, okay. So went down to London, and the temple was closed. And this is about maybe 2 in the afternoon. Temple is closed, restaurant is closed, everything was closed.
Wow.
So that was like kind of bewildering. So I'm banging the door, and nobody's coming out. Bang, 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 bang. After like 10, 15, 20 minutes banging the door, this devotee came down, and he was like in his gumcha, and he was obviously he'd been woken up, because it was time for the deities to take rest at 2 in the afternoon.
Right.
So he was an Italian devotee, with his wife and his child were living in the temple. So his name is Dhenupalaka. Do you know him?
No.
He was the Pujari for many years in London. So anyway, I said to Dhenupalaka, what's going on? He said, well, Jayatirtha sent a cassette tape from Mayapur back to London with one of the devotees, telling all the devotees here to go and meet him in India. So
Oh, wow.
overnight, everybody packed up and left.
Including you?
Huh?
Including you?
No, I didn't pack up and leave. I came
Okay.
from India.
Right.
They
I know.
they went from London to India.
Right.
So I was doing it in reverse. I was now
Right.
in London.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I said there was no way I could keep the temple open. He's the Pujari, his wife is the Pujari. He
Right.
said, so we closed the door and we just took care of the offerings and the puja. That's all we could do. We couldn't open the door, and we certainly couldn't run the restaurant. So you can imagine the restaurant had built up a clientele, a very good clientele,
Yeah.
and then suddenly overnight it's closed. So it looked weird to the public.
Is this because so many were in India? That's why? Or
Everybody went to India.
okay.
Everybody, whole yatra based on Jayatirtha's cassette, packed up and left for India.
Wow. What a blow.
Yeah, they hired a plane. There was one rich Indian disciple of Jayatirtha.
Charter. Yeah.
He chartered a plane, and they were all gone overnight.
Wow.
So I said to the devotees who were, going to go on to Dublin, I said, well, I can't just leave here
Oh.
and go back to Ireland. We need to stay here. So they left for Ireland. I stayed behind. So I phoned around all my Irish friends in London, navvies, bricklayers, carpenters, people working mostly on the building sites. I said, listen, I need some help here. Can you guys come in and help me out? So all these, bricklayers and navvies, all these guys, chopping vegetables in the kitchen, and gradually
Trying to
we
revive healthy, wealthy, and wise.
yes, so we got it gradually open, and people started coming in again, and it kind of got back to normal. A few people started drifting back from India, and we kind of got it going again.
Were you the cook? Who was the cook?
I was the cook, and then Ayodhya came through,
Okay. Yeah.
and he became the cook.
My
And
my god sister Kalalapa and Vishalaksha, they came there to help Jamuna. I don't know if Jamuna was there helping at that
yeah,
time.
Jamuna was there later on.
Uh-huh.
So then gradually, things started kind of getting back to normal. We built up the restaurant clientele again. The shock was over. And then the GBC, the whole GBC came to London, and they had a big meeting in Croom Court, Chaitanya College, and they appointed Bhagavan as the new GBC for England.
And / Zonal Acharya, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. So he went to the manor. He did this thing in the manor, and the last place he came to was Soho Street. So he called a meeting with all the devotees in Soho Street. We had a meeting in the Brahmachari ashram, and he said, "Okay." He said, "Next Thursday," I suppose this would have been maybe a Friday or a Saturday. He said, "Next Thursday, there's going to be a bus leaving for Italy. All of you who are formerly disciples of Jayatirtha, you should be on that bus, and we go to Italy, and we'll initiate you there in Italy." So I was like sitting there, and I was saying, "Excuse me, I don't think so." The first time I was told who to take initiation from, this time I'll make the decision. Nobody's going to tell me what to do.
How dare you be an independently thoughtful man?
Yeah, how dare you?
Oh,
So
even though Prabhupada said to Karandar in 72, I want all of my disciples to be independently thoughtful men, not blind followers. However, that's not always, to be an independently thoughtful person in ISKCON is not always necessarily appreciated or encouraged. Is it?
or acceptable, or even acceptable.
Uh,
So then there was kind of like a silence in the room when I said that.
Was there a few
And
other people there? A few other disciples?
yeah, it was full. It was full.
Wow. And
He
you
said,
stood out.
we're going to hire a coach and you all be on the coach and you're going to get initiated in Italy.
Right.
So the next
And you stood up against Srila Gurudev,
Bhagavan,
Patita Pavan.
Srila Bhagavan, Patit Pavan. You know, and he made all the Prabhupada disciples go to his Guru Puja.
Made them.
He made them, insisted.
If you didn't go, then you were envious, right?
So, yeah. So then the next morning, literally the next morning, Bhagavat, big Bhagavat,
Yep.
who's now Bhagavat Swami,
Yep.
we were sharing a house in South London. I was the restaurant manager, and he ended up being temple president in Bhagavan's time. And he came to me the next morning and he says, Srila Gurudev, he said, you're like a pebble in a shoe. And you should go to a place like Los Angeles where there are lots of pebbles. And when you're walking, you don't feel it so discomforting. So, okay, fine.
That must have been humbling to be compared to a pebble in a shoe.
Of Bhagavan. So I just left immediately. And I'm not exaggerating, Prabhu. When I left, the same day, the restaurant closed, and it was closed for 9 months.
Wow.
9 months before they got it open. Yeah. So I went to Ireland. I met Satrup Maharaj.
Excuse me, because you were the head cook there, and the restaurant was depending on you quite a bit. Yes?
Yeah. And I was the one who got it open again after it was closed so suddenly by all Jayatirtha's men just taking off.
And he didn't consider the repercussions of that. So you went to Los Angeles, and now all of a sudden the whole new ISKCON world is opening up to you, and you meet Satsarup Maharaj there.
No, I went to Ireland.
And you went to Ireland first.
I went to Ireland because that was the nearest place. And Preeta was in charge of Ireland, and he didn't want to have anything to do with Bhagavan. He said, no, I want Satrup Maharaj as the GBC for here.
Okay.
So they arranged that, and he became the GBC and the Guru for Ireland, took initiation from him. And what was interesting was I asked Satrup Maharaj for initiation, and he refused. So I said, oh, this is interesting. So here's Bhagavan forcing me, and here's Satrup Maharaj refusing.
What was his reason for refusing?
You don't know me, and I don't know you.
Oh, wow. So it showed he had some integrity.
Yes, exactly. So he said, but given the circumstances, I suppose we should consider. I said, okay, fine. So I got initiation there, and started to develop my service in the Irish Yatra. We installed the deities there, Radha Madhava, and I started to make grounds and started managing in Ireland and getting buildings for the deities to stay in and all that kind of stuff.
Was that when you made Pragosh a devotee? Pragosh Das?
I made him a devotee in London.
Oh, you made him a devotee there.
Yeah, he came in with his girlfriend at that time, looking for a job.
Okay.
So I gave him a job. He was cleaning tables or working in the kitchen, or his girlfriend was serving behind the counter or whatever. And so then when I left to got kicked out by Bhagavan, he came to Ireland with me and eventually joined. So that's how he got involved in Krishna.
You're not the only one. I have some godbrother friends in England. One of the last times I was there, Haridas Thakur Prabhu.
Oh,
he took care of me. You know him?
Yeah, he's great. He's great. He came to visit us, me and my family, a few months ago with his wife and son.
Nice. Jamuna.
Yeah. Jamuna. Yeah, it was great.
Siddhanta Prabhu, he's always putting out the Prabhupada memories. And no matter what the latest video of a godbrother speaking Prabhupada memories, I would put it on my personal page. And when I put up Bhagavan Prabhu's video, I got some, negative feedback because godbrothers were telling me, he kicked me out of the temple, me and my wife. I mean, it was painful to hear. I mean, I guess it's an opportunity for us to practice forgiveness.
Yeah.
But we must honor the Vaishnavas. We cannot, if you don't honor me, therefore I get rid of you. That Krishna is
Yeah.
not pleased by that type of.
Yeah.
So you started cultivating a relationship with Satsvarup Maharaj. But was it very early on that you started getting into working with him on publications, or that came later?
No, that came later. So I was kind of, I was a bit too big in my boots for Pritu. And at this stage, and Pritu saw me as a threat, so we were fighting a lot. So we compromised. We were trying to buy the island where the deities are
In
now,
its wrath, in its wrath.
in Israel, but there was no money. My wife at that time, she was German,
Uh,
and she was very good with Lakshmi, really,
uh,
really good.
yeah.
So we went back to Germany and we started collecting on the American Air Force bases and military bases in
Okay.
Germany, using her accent in Germany. She sold tens of thousands of dollars worth of paintings nearly every day. I mean,
Wow.
she was incredible. So the money she collected was used to buy the island.
What was her name?
Shubha Lakshmi.
Is she still around?
No, she's not.
Oh.
So, and then I became friends with Sahotra Swami. He was in Germany at the time,
Huh?
and Astarata, Krishna Kshetra, and all the devotees who were
Was
there.
it Mahidar? Manidar?
Manidara,
Uh-huh.
Manidara, yes, yeah, all those devotees. So I was kind of like, I didn't speak German at the time, so there wasn't that much I could do. So I became the driver for the senior men. I was their driver for Sahotra and Astarata and Krishna Kshetra.
So
So
you got
wherever
some
they
you
did,
got some great association there.
yeah, yeah. So then they wanted me eventually to manage the German farm and become a part of the managerial structure
By
of the
by
German market.
by Rischerwald. By Rischerwald. I went.
Yes.
I was at Kadambakanana Swami took me there from
Wow.
Radhadesh and I got to lead the kirtan during the installation of Prabhupada's Murti.
Wow.
That was great,
Wow.
great experience.
Wonderful.
Kadamba
Wonderful.
Maharaj said to me on the way, "Hey Gaura, did you ever think of taking sannyas?" And I said, "Oh, I'm not qualified to take sannyas, Maharaj." She said, "Well, maybe you should think about getting qualified." So I felt, whoa, he's put me on the hot seat. When I got there, Prithu Prabhu was there, and he had turned his whole room was different shelves with sprouts, and he had a hydroponic system which was on a clock, and every so many hours ago, psh, psh,
Right.
would water all of the because he had some kind of liver illness, and he could
Yeah.
only eat enzyme rich foods like fresh
Yeah.
sprouts. And I
Yeah.
thought that's quite ingenious. He has a whole sprout farm in his
Yeah.
room.
Yeah.
So I got to
Yeah.
meet Sachinandan Swami for the first time also. That was, I don't remember what year all, this was maybe 2000, early 2000. But sorry for
Okay.
digressing from you. But
Yeah.
so how long did you last in Bayerischerwald?
Well, we were covering the whole of Germany because we were traveling everywhere selling paintings.
Oh, okay.
And then Sahotra said, "Well, why don't you stay here?" I said, "Well, I really belong to the Irish Yatra. I'm only here because Pritu's driving me crazy, and my wife's a good collector, and they need money in Ireland." So
Yeah.
he wrote, without telling me, Sahotra wrote to Satsrup Maharaj and asking him, can we keep Vidura? Can he stay here because
Yeah.
he's not happy in Ireland, and we'd like to have him. So Satsrup Maharaj wrote back a very nice letter to Sahotra, which Sahotra gave me, and I still have the letter. And he said, well, I'd really like to have Vidura come and spend some time with me here in America. I know he's not happy in Ireland, and I know there's a clash of personalities with him and Pritu. But if he can come and spend some time with me, I would really appreciate that, so as I can help to cultivate him in Krishna consciousness. So that was it. Then I just pretty soon after that we ended up in America.
Okay. Where did
Um,
you land? Where did you land?
I landed in JFK,
Yeah.
and then I took a train, an Amtrak to Philadelphia, and found my way to the Philadelphia Temple. Stayed
That
in the
was
BTG house.
BTG House, right? There was Tatvavit was there, Kundali was there,
Yeah, Kundali was there.
Ravindra,
Dravida,
Jayadvaita Swami.
and Jayadvaita Swami, Yadu Bar.
Oh,
There's a whole bunch of Bali was there, and there's a lot of devotees staying there.
so 1982 maybe?
84. That was
84.
84.
Okay.
Yeah. And then shortly after that, my wife joined me from Germany, and we got our own place together near the Philly Temple. We moved out of the BTG house because BTG was only for men.
Right.
And who else was there? Oh yeah, Pranada was there,
Uh-huh.
and
Was Jagannath Sutta there?
Jagannath Sutta, Mandali Bhadra, Adi Keshava, Kundali. There's a whole bunch of.
I started university clubs at 3 universities around that time, and in Toronto. And I was having a lot of success. It just so happened that the University of Toronto was a lot of Jewish students, 50,000 students at that campus. And I was offering vegetarian cooking courses every Monday night, modeled on what Stamba Prabhu offered, Cooking and Consciousness. Radhanath Swami copied the same program. It was a series of classes, bringing a feast to the students, every week, and gradually, gradually cultivating them. Anyway, the rabbi started to get really irate with me because I was telling his students, you know that you're the chosen people of God, right? The Jewish people, and they were going, yeah. And I'd be telling them, so that's that's Judah, right? That's the Judaic culture, yeah. I said, well, in ancient India, they have a dynasty called the Jadu dynasty, and sometimes they pronounce their Y's like a J. So Jadu, Judah, and I said, and this is God's dynasty. They're the chosen ones. I said, so if you chant this Hare Krishna mantra, you'll become a better Jew. So which is a little bit of a stretch. Well, no, it's not a stretch actually. If you do chant Hare Krishna, you'll become a better anything. So then the Jewish students would go back to that Rabbi Moshe Silverman. He was like a real hardcore Jewish rabbi with the black hat, the black beard, the what do they call it, pesa, the little
Yeah.
curly hairs on the side, and he was getting angry at me. He started because I was getting the Jewish students more and more. They were liking
Wow.
Prasadam, and they were getting Prabhupada's books. And he printed an article in the student newspaper called The Varsity saying, if you meet a young man on campus and he invites you to a free vegetarian dinner and he seems to have an answer to all your questions, beware. You've just met a dangerous member of the Hare Krishna cult, and they have brainwashing techniques. And because Judaism is so high, most Jewish kids can't make the grade. So there's these cults that are waiting in the wings, to prey on
Um,
the Jewish students. And then the rabbi organized Cult Awareness Week, and I
oh,
I went up to him. I said, "Do you have anything on Hare Krishna?" I was just dressed in winter plain clothes, and he handed me "Dial Om for Murder." An article in Rolling Stone magazine about one god brother murdering another because he had stolen his wife, or she had cheated on. Anyway, he just found whatever stool he could find. That was what he
wow.
said was Hare Krishna. So then
Mm,
I heard that he organized a talk on what is Hare Krishna, and guess what? It was Jagannath Sutta who came to speak against the Hare Krishna movement. He had become a member of the anti-cult movement. He was dressed in a
mm,
little suit, and I was just sitting up in the classroom listening. And the main point I still remember him saying was, when I was in the Hare Krishna movement, which is called ISKCON, I really wanted to study Sanskrit. And he said, but the temple president, I don't know if it was Ravindra Sarup Prabhu or who, but he said, the temple president told me, I have to go on Sankirtan. And he said, Sankirtan is how they get all their money. They distribute books and different things. And he said, but I wanted to study Sanskrit and they forced me to go on Sankirtan. And I realized, ooh, wow, like, even though we all had some pressure on us to go out and do book distribution, sometimes you may have to go a little easier on devotees because if it turns them against the movement,
Mhm.
then that's not cool.
What's the use? What's the use?
Yeah, so that's my Jagannath Sutta story. But I was amazed listening to a senior godbrother speaking against Prabhupada's mission. I'm like, wow, that is about face. It's like I had a hard time wrapping my head around that. Anyway, so you made it to the BTG house, and what service did they give you?
Well, I was working with the press, helping out, and then eventually I ended up moving to Potomac because the Potomac Temple was in a little bit of a problem, and Satrup Maharaj, he moved there to make sure that, because I was part of his zone. So he
I
said,
spent
well,
6 months there with Gunagrai
really?
Maharaj in 1992. He asked me to take charge of his 12 bhaktas for the Krishna Fest party, and I drive them every
Yeah,
day to the Capitol Mall, and I got to
right,
live in Prabhupada's house for 6 months. So
yeah.
that was a lot of fun. Tamal Krishna Maharaj would visit our party, Danadar Maharaj, Ayodhyapati before he became BB Govindaswamy, Mukunda Maharaj. But my frustration was I had to do the Bhakta sitting so that Gunagrai Maharaj could be free to be with all these godbrothers. I wanted to be with these godbrothers too, but someone had to take care of the 12
Oh,
Bhaktas.
yeah.
So I let
So,
Kirtan. Sorry, go ahead.
so I was pretty well established in Philadelphia, and
Right?
that's when it was in Philadelphia that Satrup Maharaj sent me out doing the interviews for the Leela Amrita and the Prabhat Leela books. So I was,
When you got to DC, he started asking you to do that.
no, I did that in Philly before I got to DC.
Okay, okay.
But then when Potomac was in trouble, um, he pulled me off the interviews, and he said, "Well, we got to do something about Potomac." So he moved there, and he knew that I was already established in Philly. I had my own apartment pretty much next door to the temple, and my wife was well established. Or my greenhouse. He said, "I'll tell you what. If you move to Potomac, you can stay in my house. I'll move out."
Wow.
So we moved to Potomac, and I stayed in his house, and that's how I ended up in Potomac. So then, of course, then Potomac, we tried to get going in Potomac and establish the temple and get things moving and everything like that. And then, of course, as you know, Bhagavan fell down.
Uh-huh.
So then he wrote that Guru Reform Notebook that you just showed me now. And
Wait a
after
minute.
that,
Bhagavan fell. Oh, I see. So Satsuru Maharaj, in response to that, wrote
yeah,
um,
yeah,
the Guru.
directly in response to Bhagavan's fall down.
Okay.
He, he wrote that. So, and then,
Dr. Treya was the editor. You're the production. The research was Archie Devi Dasi, the composing Dwarkadish Devi Dasi, proofreading Pranada Devi Dasi, layout Bhakta Greg, and typists were Varuna, Jita Shakti Devi Dasi, Acharya Devi Dasi. Yeah.
so shortly after that, then he himself, he gave up all this ostentatious worship and all
I
this.
remember. I remember he was the first to give up the Srila Gurupad title, and he probably got some flack for that, I guess.
Yeah, he did, even from his own disciples. So, and then he decided, okay, this is not for me. I want to be just a sannyasi. travel and preach, and that's what he did. So he resigned from the GBC. I was there only because he asked me to go there to
Right.
help to manage the temple. So when he resigned from the GBC, he had no more GBC responsibilities or anything like that. I said to him, "Can I go also?" He
Uh-huh.
said, "Where do you want to go?" I said, "Well, I'd like to go back to Africa, where I'd been with Jayatirtha."
Who,
He
excuse
said,
me, if you don't
"Well,
mind me asking, was Gunya Rupini there as treasurer? I know she did that service for a while. Gunya Rupini, Devi Dasi. Damodar was one of the earlier devotees
I
in
don't remember
Washington.
Gunu Rupini. I don't think I met her."
Okay, Damodar was one of the early presidents there. He was probably gone by that time.
Yeah, yeah, he must have
Uh,
been. So Sastru Maharaj, he said, "Okay, we have 2 or 3 books going through production right now.
okay,
If you finish those books off, I forget what those books were." And he said, "When they're done," he said, "Well, you have my blessings. You can go."
so did
So
you help? Did you help with? Did you start on the first Leelamrita?
no, I wasn't there for that one. I
Who?
did the Prabhupada Nectar
Oh,
And the Prabhupada Leela books
very nice.
in the Leela Amrita
Yes.
edition. They
Yeah.
were my responsibility. So then, about I think 3 or 4 months after that, I headed back to Africa,
Okay,
and
before we go to Africa, so you had done all the Prabhupada Leela work before you went to Africa?
yes,
Can you say something about that? Anything like anything that stood out for you? Because you probably interviewed a lot. What would you say? 50 devotees? 100 devotees?
in the time I was on the road,
To do the Prabhupada Leela series and
oh, I'd say be a couple of thousand.
wow.
I was on the road for 2 years.
Wow. Did your wife mind?
He funded it.
Wow. That's
She was the funder. She funded Satrup Maharaj's travels. She funded the whole Gita Nagari press almost
wow.
single-handedly. I mean,
Subhalakshmi Devi Dasi.
she was big. She was big.
Ah, yeah. You
But
don't know where she is now.
she's in Germany. She's
Okay,
in,
but wow, your head must have been exploding with Prabhupada Katha, 2,000 devotees talking to them about Prabhupada.
it was quite an amazing experience.
Now,
But
yes,
we'll have to continue at another time. I've been called for
okay.
dinner.
That's a good place to stop, though.
Yeah, I think so. I think
to hear
so.
to hear more about and give you some time to meditate on some of the outstanding. I mean, I'm sure they were all outstanding, but maybe some may stand out for you more. Maybe there's some stories that didn't make it into the Prabhupada Leela. I don't know.
Well, we collected, in the time I was on the road, we collected enough. This was the plan to print 108 Prabhupada Nectar books.
Wow.
But the cassettes got burnt down in the fire in Gita Nagari.
So that's what we want to tap in from you. I don't know what you remember, but
The
it,
only way that, and I've discussed this with Dwarkadish at length many times, and other devotees, but mostly with Dwarkadish. The only way it can kind of come out is if I'm prompted by something that's part of the discussion and said, "Oh yeah, I remember blah blah blah." But to try to me initiate the
right.
conversation is not easy. It's not
Maybe I
easy.
can bring the Prabhupada Leela books to
Yeah,
to to the next session.
yeah.
Proper
Or
nectar.
maybe I could go through, because I was in touch with Satru Maharaj backwards and forwards
Yeah.
every week,
Okay.
by letter or by phone, because you have to understand, me being on the road like that, I was seen as the representative of ISKCON.
Yeah. Yeah.
So by that time, thousands of Prabhupada disciples had left. So
Wow.
whenever I would arrive in a city, wherever it was,
Yeah.
Chicago, New York, or whatever, I was seen as the representative. So they took out all their venom on me.
Oh no.
I
Oh
was there for
no.
the nectar, but they gave nectar, yeah,
They
but they also,
chastise you.
yeah. So I would have to phone Satru Maharaj or write him a letter saying, well, I heard this today. What happened? What's the story behind this thing? So then he'd have to calm me down and tell me
Right.
what was going on, and
Yeah.
kind of prop me up to make sure I didn't completely collapse, because
Wow.
I was taking a lot of flack in those days,
Wow.
at the time.
Wow.
So you can imagine. So
I can't
I was,
imagine.
I was just a kid,
Ah,
spiritually, I was just a kid. I didn't
uh-huh.
know anything.
But you were growing
Nothing.
up fast. You were growing up real fast.
Oh yeah, I was dragged up. You know what I mean?
Great. So let's address some of that. You let me know next time when it's convenient for you. Okay.
Okay, Jai Prabhuji.
Thanks so much, Vidura Prabhu. It was ecstatic.
Hare
All
Krishna.
glories,
Take
all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.
care. Hare Bol.